Thank you, Abby. Lovely to be with you all again today. Lovely to see some people here in the church building as well. When I was here 2 weeks ago, I loved having some people here because I actually heard some laughter at my jokes. You can't realize how soul-destroying it is because cameras don't laugh. So please laugh as much as you can during this service and the message. And as was said by Abby and Debs, we're in the third part of our series called Building Bridges, where we're just looking to really connect with people. There seems to be so much disconnect in our culture and in our society at the moment. And in particular, I'm thinking about friendships today. How can our friendships, which are being impacted by the restrictions, by the limits on what we can do, how can we really make them count? How can they be life-changing? How can they have a purpose? And so that's really what we're going to focus on today. Hopefully you'll be able to follow along via the PowerPoint as well. And if you're on the chat, we'd love to see some interaction today. So really what I'm going to challenge us with in this day and age is this idea that we should focus on the sick and hurting with our time and with our friendships. If you want your friendships to really count, if you want your friendships to have a real purpose, then I'm going to suggest to you as a result of what Ab's just read to us, let's focus on the sick and the hurting in order to make a real difference. And you might say, well, hold on, David, what are you saying here? I've got a busy life, I've got a job, I've got family, I've got all sorts of things going on here, and now you're telling me to hang around at West Suffolk Hospital, just to live there, to be amongst the sick and the hurting? Well, it's not quite like that, is it? Because actually, if you scratch beneath the surface, it's not just people in West Suffolk Hospital are sick and hurting. If you scratch beneath the surface, there's plenty of people who are struggling with non-physical ailments. They're struggling with mental health problems. They're struggling with being alone. They're struggling with anxiety. They're struggling with multiple things. Where really, if we could just offer some friendship, some sense of connection, just that thing that Debbie talked about, just going to a next door neighbor and having a coffee at an invitation, could that make a difference? I've got to be honest though, it's hard, isn't it? My natural preference is to hang out with people who are sorted, people who haven't got problems. Why? They're low maintenance, aren't they? It's dead easy. You can just chill out and have fun. Whereas people who are sick and hurt, and often they demand something of us. But as you journey with these people, the benefits, the values, the depth of friendship that emerges, it truly can be life-changing both for them and for you. And I'm going to give you 3 extra reasons why it's worth the extra effort this morning. And I've listed those on the PowerPoint. First of all, it can be a means of help. Secondly, it can be a means of hope. And thirdly, it can be a means of healing. We can come alongside and help people. We can come alongside people and give them a hope, especially in these uncertain, dark days of COVID. And thirdly, we can bring a healing at a whole new level that can be truly life-changing. And so we're going to look at this passage that Abby read for us. 2 incidences from the life of Jesus that kind of reflected the emphasis that Jesus had on prioritizing the sick and hurting with the way we spend our time and our friendships. The verses or the incidents are recorded in the Gospel of Mark, which is an account by John Mark, who was one of the closest friends of Peter, who was the best friend of Jesus. And so you can see this story emerges of the life of Jesus. It's an all-action account. It's mainly based around the miracles of Jesus and some of the things he did. And it's all about Jesus serving. There was opposition coming at him. There were people who were against what he was doing, but he just kept serving and serving, which would have been a great encouragement during the days in which it was written in the first century for those battling with the Roman Empire at the time. And we're jumping in Mark chapter 2, where we discover that Jesus is now incredibly popular. He's gone public. He's gone out there with his ministry. He's done some healing. He's doing some teaching, and crowds are coming from everywhere. I don't know how we would have coped during COVID, but this is what it is. There's no social distancing going on here. The crowds are coming out. And the problem is, when you become popular, you've got to start making some choices about who you spend time with. When life gets busy, when there are demands from multiple people, you've got to say, these people are my priority versus those people. And this is what we're hopefully going to learn of Jesus today. So let's get stuck into those verses that we've had read to us. Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. My first question for you this morning: who around you could do with some help? Who around you could do with some help? Think about your neighbors. Think about the people you work with. Think about your friends. Think about those connections you've got. Is there any name coming to your heart and your mind where you just think, do you know what? I really think they could do with some help. Well, keep this person in mind as we go through the next 5 verses or so. First of all, then, let's read from verse 1. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he'd come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even on the outside the door. And he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. So Jesus, at this point in time, is using Capernaum as his home base of operations. He was out there preaching and teaching in different villages, different towns, but he had this home base, and it was probably based around the house of 2 of his very best friends, Peter and Andrew. And that was his base. And you can imagine he's been out there. He's been surrounded by crowds. He comes home. If he was anything like me, it's right, feet up, put the sport on, Netflix on, let's relax, have a cup of tea, chill out. But none of this was able to happen, was it? He got back home, and what happened? The crowd's like, whoa, Jesus is back. Let's pile in there. Let's see what he's got to say. And suddenly this crowd begins to hit him on this trading route of Capernaum in the northern part of Israel, such a key strategic route, so people from all sorts of backgrounds are able to connect with what Jesus is saying. And the thing is, once we start trying to connect with people, do you know what? At times it's going to be inconvenient. At times it's going to be awkward. And yet we see the benefits of it, just like Jesus demonstrated here. And we see in particular 4 men. They decide to help their paralyzed friend. And they thought, Jesus is back in town. We've heard he's doing miracles. Let's get our friend to him. And of course, they arrive at the house. There's big crowds there. They can't get in. But such was the design of houses back then in that part of the world. It was usually a flat-roofed house with an external staircase so you could access the roof. And that's where these guys decide to target in order to bring their paralyzed friend, in order to get him to the feet of Jesus. And so the verses carry on here in verses 4 and 5. Since the 4 men could not get their paralyzed friend to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it and then lowered the mat, and the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." So these men were not put off by the obstacles. They were so passionate about their friend and wanting to see healing and wholeness brought to their friend, they were prepared to do anything. I don't know, I've carried a few cupboards and things like that upstairs. I don't think I've carried too many people upstairs, but just, you can imagine 4 guys with a stretcher, with a guy on there, trying to get up the stairs. They get on the roof and there's more problems there. There's tiles, there's all sorts of things in the way, this compacted earth so as to protect the internal house. They dug through that and they broke through to drop this man in front of the feet of Jesus. Now, I've underlined there something which was a game changer as I read it. I've read this passage so many times, but this is what leapt out at me. When Jesus saw whose faith? Was it the faith of the paralyzed man? Did Jesus just see the guy and have pity on him? No, it says when he saw their faith. The faith of the 4 people who carried the disabled guy there. That was the game changer. Do you see that? What a revelation that is. Sometimes I just think, people are not going to come to Jesus. People are not going to come to church because their faith isn't ready for it. Actually, the issue is not other people's faith. The issue is your faith and my faith. Are we prepared to do what these 4 guys did? We believe in Jesus, but is it prepared to be seen in action? Is it prepared to climb up staircases? Is it prepared to carry people to Jesus? Is it prepared to dig through roofs? Is it prepared to build bridges? It's on us. That is where the demonstration of our faith is, this intentionality to bring people to Jesus. Wow, what a game changer that is. As I look around some of my friends and think, there's no way they'd ever become a Christian. Actually, the initial step is down to me, not to them. It's my faith that's going to bring that transition in their life. So this week, what bold action of faith are you going to take? What's going to be an action that says, do you know what? I believe in Jesus. I believe Jesus can help hurting people. Perhaps you even join with some other people and say, come on, let's make a difference in someone's life. What are you going to do this week to help the hurting? Second, what hope do people need today? We believe that our message of Jesus brings hope. What's the kind of hope that people need today? We're here in Bury St. Edmunds, where usually life is quite comfortable. Life is nice. We talked about this the other week. But still, as you get to know people, there's anxiety, particularly at this time. There's stresses, there's loneliness, there's difficulties. There's somehow with these restrictions, you've got to think there's got to be a better day ahead. What can we offer people? Well, we can offer them something more than the immediate, as we see from these verses that Jesus had this encounter with this crowd. Verses 6-8 say, now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, why does this fellow talk like this? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, why are you thinking these things? Some people turned up with a different agenda. Some people turned up to see Jesus, to see what he could do, to listen to his teaching. Other people went along thinking, right, we're going to check this young man out. Let's see what he's about. He doesn't seem to be one of us religious types. And of course, everything Jesus was doing seemed to go against what these religious types were looking for. Like they were saying, how can he offer forgiveness of sins? Isn't that God's department? Doesn't God nullify sin? Doesn't God declare people righteous and clean? How can he do this? And so immediately they're saying, this is wrong. They perhaps suspected there was something different about Jesus with his miracles and his teaching, but they weren't prepared to consider that Jesus could actually be God. This was the issue. Maybe a good teacher, maybe a magician of some kind, a miracle worker, maybe a good guy, but fundamentally, God? Really? And so Jesus vocalizes out loud their skepticism and what they were thinking. And he carries on with the conversation. Verses 9-10, he says, what's easier to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So Jesus asks this question, doesn't he? What's it easier to do? Make a paralyzed guy walk or forgive sins? What do you think? What's the easier one? To be honest, for human beings, both are pretty difficult, aren't they? How do we make someone instantaneously walk who's been paralyzed for a period of time or even all their life? How do we forgive sins? For human beings, this is difficult. But for God, piece of cake. We have a huge God, an amazing God. He can do this stuff for fun, as Jesus demonstrates. The issue is not so much which one's harder, but what is the evidence for seeing this kind of God action in someone's life? And obviously, if we think about that, surely it's got to be someone walking again. You can verify that has happened. Why? Because one minute they can't walk, next minute they can. And so Jesus is combining these two things and saying, look, if I do this miracle in his life, if I do this physical miracle, do you know what? You're going to see there is a forgiveness, a spiritual miracle take place there as well. Why did Jesus want to do this? Well, now he's starting to give some clues about who he was. The skeptics are thinking maybe a good guy, maybe a magician, but no way is he God. And that's why in verse 10, Jesus says, but I want you to know the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. The Son of Man was an expression used in the Old Testament. In the Psalms, it identifies with a person. In the book of Ezekiel, it identifies with a prophet. It also does that in the book of Daniel. Then Daniel adds an extra twist on it. Because Daniel has this vision, this picture, this dream from heaven, where the Son of Man comes and brings in a kingdom from God that releases from oppression. This is the angle Jesus is bringing on this. Yes, I'm a man. Yes, I'm a prophet, but actually I am God. I am coming with my kingdom to set people free, whether it's free from physical disability or, more important, the permanent, life-changing thing of forgiveness of sins, so we get right with God, right with ourselves, and right with other people. This is what Jesus is bringing to the table. It's a game changer. It's huge. And he confirms this in verses 11 and 12. So he said to the man, I tell you, get up, take your mat and go home. And he got up, took his mat and walked home in the full view of them all. They amazed everyone and they praised God, saying, we've never seen anything like this. This is why the hope we bring with Jesus is amazing. Yes, it can bring temporary physical relief, but also it can bring spiritual, eternal relief. Jesus deals with us as a whole person. This is why we're trying to encourage us, those who follow Jesus, those who believe in Jesus, saying, this is the true hope for people. It's not just some temporary sticky plaster solution. Jesus deals with the whole person, with the deep-rooted issues. Jesus gets upstream and deals with the big problems. On the physical outside, we see various problems, but the common thing that we've all got in terms of problem is this element of sin, selfishness, the me factor within us all. This needs to be addressed in order to truly bring healing. And this is what Jesus is offering, and we as his followers pass that on to other people. Let's focus on this last incident now as we come to an end here. Verses 13 to 14, we think about this healing that Jesus brings. Again, it's a new angle on what healing really is. As we think about the people around us who need healing, what does that look like for them? Jesus, in verse 13, once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. So this is more subtle type of healing. Not so physically obvious, because this guy, Levi, seemed to have life sorted. He was rich, he was successful, but he wasn't actually the sort of guy you really wanted to hang out with if you didn't want it to stay on the right side of the law. He was a cheat. He was a schemer. He was someone who was, working with the Roman authorities. He was almost like a traitor to his own nation, to feather his own nest. But Jesus somehow saw beyond that and saw a man who needed a healing touch in his life. And I just love it because, again, Jesus is busy, isn't he? A large crowd. Loads of people demanding on Jesus' time and energy, yet he still sees the individual. I don't know about you, but life can get incredibly busy, so busy we miss the individual. That's why I love Deb's story this week. She was just chatting in the pre-service chat, so busy redecorating their house. When the neighbor comes around and says, come for a coffee, it was a real challenge whether to go and spend time with that person. Say, no, I'm busy. I've got to redecorate my house. I've only got a few days on holiday. But no, she went. And this is what Jesus did. He has the ability to break through the business and the crowd and say, look, there's an individual. Even though this individual seems like a horrible person, he realized to see beyond the pressure, the crowds, the reputation, and see the potential, see the need of the individual, and turn that around. Jesus follows this up, as we see in the next few verses 15 and 16. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples. But there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with sinners and tax collectors, they asked the disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? I just love this picture here. Jesus, the Son of God, hanging out with people who are far away from God. The religious people are going, what are you doing? If you're of God, surely you want to hang around with us. We're the spiritual ones. We're the holy ones. We're the religious ones. We're the ones who go to church. You're God. Come and hang out with us. And Jesus seems to have another priority. He seems to enjoy having dinner with other people who don't go to the equivalent of church. How exciting is that? He just said yes to invitations. And maybe that's one thing we've got to discover this week. Learn to say yes to invitations, to those coffee invitations when there is that opening. Just say yes. Get comfortable and relax with people. And start to see the impact, the healing effect it can be by just saying yes. And of course, he gets so much criticism here. You can imagine, you've been here before probably. Oh, what a terrible reputation you may get by hanging out with those people. Jesus didn't care. He became someone of no reputation. Oh, what a terrible example to the young Christians and young believers by hanging out with those people. Again, Jesus is saying we can still go and make a difference there. This is the example Jesus wants us to get and follow. Got to confess at times what people think, and the busyness of church can stop this kind of stuff happening. We don't have time to say yes to individuals. Why? because we're too busy with the rotas and everything that goes on in church, the multiple services, like pre-COVID, 3 services, midweek meetings, it's all going on. Where'd you get any time for this stuff? Hey, we're in a new season now, COVID. We got 1, just starting 2 services on a Sunday. Hardly anything goes on during the week. Perhaps we can use this time to say yes more often and not worry about what people think and just go and hang out. Can we bring some healing? Can we bring some wholeness just by hanging out with people like Jesus? We might say we want to be Christ-like. We want to be godly. Well, this is what Jesus is doing. Are we prepared to do that? And here we see the reason why we hang out. This shows what we should do in verse 17 as Jesus challenges us to be a doctor with people. Verse 17 says, on hearing this, Jesus said to them, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but I've come to call the sinner. Jesus is calling on a doctor's approach. Stolen the first aid kit here from church. There we go. You know, when do we need this? Has anybody who's come into this building today needed this? No. Why? Because we're all healthy, full of vitality. I can see it in our faces. It's great. You don't need this. But there are people out in our society, in our culture. There are people in your workplace, your neighbors, who do need some healing, who do need the equivalent of a doctor's touch. What do doctors do? Oh, they hang out with their fellow doctors reading books. No, they do a little bit of that, but fundamentally, what do doctors do? They're out there among sick people. They don't compromise on hygiene. They don't compromise on their teaching, their training. They just go out there and bring healing. This is the picture Jesus is offering us, saying, I've come to hang out with people who are hurting and bring my healing. I will not compromise on holiness. I will not compromise on purity, but still I'm going to hang out with these people in order to make a difference. What a beautiful picture. Jesus, doctors, they are not neutral observers. They are committed activists, committed to making a difference. God is on purpose to set oppressed people free. And if we're serious about following God, being a disciple of Jesus, hey, we've got to take our medical kit of Jesus and get out there and hang out with people and see if we can make a difference. So, in conclusion, what's God saying to you today? What is God saying to you today? Has he spoken to you about a particular person or a group of people that perhaps you can take that doctor's approach and bring some help and bring some hope? Is there an invitation waiting there for you to say yes to? Is there an invitation for you to offer that could make a difference for somebody else? What are we going to do about it? What's going to be our response to this? With Jesus, we've got help, we've got hope, we've got healing this week. Perhaps we can pass this message on to other people by liking, inviting, or subscribing to share this message to others. I just really want to finish off before I hand back to Debs to do a time of reflective prayer. Just tell you a little bit about my journey. Earlier this year, I started meeting with a group of people from both our congregations at Wesley and Westroad, and we started to set out some goals for the year. And as we met as a group, I said, you know what, I'm struggling to make non-church friends. I'm a pastor of a church. All the time I'm hanging out with Christian people. The demands, the emails, the requests for visits, you name it. It's just surrounded by that. And even then, when you've dealt with your own church, you've got other churches, other church leaders, other Christian organizations. I just thought, I've been here 3 years and I'm still struggling to really make connections with some of my potential non-Christian friends. And so we got the group to pray about it and interact with one another. And then one of the guys eventually said to me, David, I need you to come and help me with my football team. Your background's in football. Come and help me with my football team. Back to what I think you said earlier, Debs, about join a social club. Or I think it was Abby said it. Yeah, join a club. So I decided to go along and just get involved with this football team. And it's just the step this week, we're beginning to make friends, already beginning to visit people, beginning to make connections. But the step this week we've decided is just sending an email out to these players and their families with my phone number on saying, look, if you need some help at this time, just give me a call. Give me a call. I thought, I can't preach this message without backing it up with that kind of action. I can't just sit here and listen and pontificate and preach it unless it was going to impact me and me to do something. And just to further back it up, I was thrilled this week. The elders and staff met together and we just spending a time focusing on prayer and different things. And we made a commitment this week. For the next month, we're going to pray for 5 non-Christians each. That's what we're going to do this month. We're going to pray. We all identified 5 people we're going to pray for. We named them and said right throughout this next month or so, we commit as elders and staff to pray for 5 people. What bridge is God going to build with these people? I have no idea over the next month, but I know prayer could make a difference. Perhaps that's your next step as well. Would you join us this week? Would you be brave in stepping out in some way, maybe for an invitation or reaching out? Would you also in your prayer life say, yeah, I'm going to commit to pray for somebody in particular in these coming days? Last Wednesday, we had a brilliant prayer day. Hope you enjoyed it. I love the resources. Peter's here who helped develop the resources this week. And it's just been brilliant getting these messages back. Can we raise up the spirit of prayer in our church to make a difference? Bring some help. Bring some hope. Bring some healing to hurting people.